Welcome everyone! You guys are in for a treat today. Shortly after this game was played, it was already called the Game of the Decade because it includes piece sacks, rook sacks, and most interestingly, an amazing king hunt. This was played between Wei Yi and Lazaro Bruzon Batista in 2015. Let's get this started. Wei Yi had white and opened with e4, c5, the Sicilian defense, knight f3, e6, then knight to c3 and a6. Black can still go for a few Sicilian variations, including the Khan, Taimanov and Scheveningen. After a6, white at least doesn't have any bishop b5 options anymore. Wei Yi played bishop e2 first. It seems more normal to just go d4 here, but of course just developing like this cannot be bad. Knight to c6. Here white did go for d4, cd4, so now we have a kind of open Sicilian, and after knight takes and queen to c7, we have transposed to the Taimanov variation, although the game will transpose again later. From c7 the queen, along with the knight, takes control over the e5 square, thus making e4, e5 harder to play for white. White castled, knight to f6, bishop to e3, developing and reinforcing the knight. Bishop e7, f4, hoping for e4, e5 at some point, and after d6, having put the pawns on d6 and e6 means black now transposed to the Scheveningen variation. Again, playing d6 is important to stop white from playing e5. King to h1, castles, queen to e1, planning queen to g3. Black traded on d4 and played b5. Black wants to go bishop to b7, pressuring the e-pawn, and at some point black hopes to play b4, which would undefend the e4 pawn. Queen to g3, supporting the center but also keeping an eye on g7. Bishop to b7, a3, stopping that b4 idea. Now let me just boldly state the obvious. Black cannot take the e-pawn because queen g7 is mate. Therefore black continued rook from a to d8. Very logical, the d-file may open at some point, and when that happens the rook stands well on d8. White also activates his a-rook. Rook to d7 came next, which is also quite common. Black wants to put the queen on d8, where it covers more dark squares. Bishop d3, we can imagine the bishop becoming active after e4, e5. And here, black landed into some trouble after queen to d8. Black could also go rook to e8, and sometimes black can then go bishop to d8 to prepare e5. Instead, black went queen to d8, and white followed up with queen to h3. And now black probably regretted playing queen to d8, because in this position black would like to go e6, e5 to block out the white bishops, but now that's not possible anymore because the queen isn't covering e5. Now black's best try is now rook to e8, because white would like to go bishop takes f6, bishop takes and then e5, threatening with queen takes h7 check and taking the bishop, but that doesn't work because black here has bishop to h4, blocking out the queen. However, instead of that, white can also go for rook to e3, and after g6 go rook from e to f3, and now f4, f5 is a big threat, so black is in some trouble anyway, but what happened in the game was worse for black, because after black played g6, now white played a typical Sicilian pawn break, f4, f5, aiming to quickly open up the f-file. Black here played e5, blocking out the bishop, bishop to e3, but one of black's big problems in this position is that he just has no counterplay. He cannot try the counterattack with d5, for example, because after the trades, knight takes and bishop takes, here white can go f6, and black cannot save the bishop with bishop d6, for example, because of simply queen to h6, and here black has to sack the queen to stop mate. But taking the pawn is also bad, because after bishop takes, white simply takes that bishop, and if black takes the rook, then the rook is hanging on d7. Now black does have other options in this variation, but none of them work. Going back to the game, black went rook to e8, and now Wei Yi decided to start opening up the black king with pawn takes g6, and after pawn takes pawn, the knight leaped into action with knight to d5, and under pressure, unfortunately black didn't defend in the best way. He decided to take on d5 with the knight, but he overlooked the brilliant combination that came next. Let me first briefly mention that the best chance was bishop takes knight, and after pawn takes d5 go rook to b7 to prepare to trade queens with queen to c8, because after what black did, knight takes d5, you'll notice that the f-file is now open, and Wei Yi exploited that brilliantly with rook takes f7. Just shattering the defense around the king. Now the king has no choice but to take the rook and just make a run for it. If he had tried knight to f6 to cover against queen h7 checkmate, then white has queen to e6. Now if black would do nothing, then white would go rook f8 check and bishop to h6 checkmate. So let's say king to h8, but then white at the very least wins material after bishop to g5, now threatening the knight with 3 pieces, and after, for example, rook to g8, white will take on f6 and take on d7, and the game will end soon. Therefore the king has to take, but this will also prove deadly for black. The queen came in with check. Now if king to f6, then it's actually forced checkmate after pawn takes d5. Therefore king to e6 only move, but the king got dragged further up the board with pawn takes d5 check. Again, the king has to take. If the bishop takes, then bishop takes g6, threatening with queen f7 checkmate. Rook to f8 defends, but then there is queen h3 check, king to f6, and again black is mated after rook f1 check, king takes bishop, and queen h6 checkmate. So again, the king takes, but now another brilliant sacrifice, bishop e4 check. A great move, but also essential, because if the king manages to escape to c6 and c7, then white is just losing being a rook down. Now if the king tries to run back, then white has queen takes pawn check, bishop f6, queen f5 check, king to f7, and after queen h7 check and king to f8, black will lose tons of material after bishop h6 check. So the king does take again, and now this cool move, queen to f7, just quietly sliding the queen over, but this means that the king is cut off from the f-file and the d5 square. Bishop to f6 was tried, but the attack just continued with bishop d2 discovered check, king to d4. Now Wei Yi did repeat once, bishop e3 check, king e4, but now again another crushing queen move, queen to b3, with a massive threat queen d3 checkmate. Now the king avoided that with king to f5, but the misery just continued with rook f1 check, king to g4, and again Wei Yi found the only winning move, queen to d3, making queen e2 check and queen takes g6 check possible. Now black tried to activate his own queen with bishop takes pawn check, but that wasn't going to be enough. King takes bishop, black did get a check in, queen a8 check, but after king to g1, all the light squares are covered, so the queen can only watch from a distance. Bishop g5 was then played, but after queen e2 check, king to h4, bishop f2 check, king to h3, and bishop to e1, white is threatening with a quick checkmate after rook to f3, so black resigned. Now it could have ended like this. Black could give some last checks, queen a7 check, king h1, queen a8 check, but then white would simultaneously block the check and give a check of his own, and after king g4, queen g2 check, king to h5, black will be mated after rook h3 check, bishop h4, and rook takes bishop checkmate. Now just a true gem of a game. Wei Yi entertained the entire chess world with this and deservedly got a lot of praise for it. Now this also showed how powerful it can be to sacrifice material if it means that the enemy king will be dragged out in the open, But it also showed the necessary restraint, because white also had to play prophylactic moves, like queen to f7 and bishop to e4, to prevent the king from escaping. Wei Yi, of course, was well aware of that, and let's just hope he'll produce another brilliancy like this again sometime. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed this game as much as I did. Check out more great games in the playlist. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching Chess Student, and take care.